Hello and welcome, my name's Ryan, I'm also known as RM2K Dev. In this video we're going to be adding some of those effects that you saw in my first demonstration, such as the tires being left on the floor, the smoke from when you do a drift on asphalt, and maybe some of the dirt that shoots out from behind the vehicle when you go over the grass. So we're going to start off first by creating those tires. Now the reason why I've constructed the game in this format by having this base car object and having them inherit from that is so that we can use these effects will apply both to the player and both to the NPC, and we're going to use a very generic concept to do that so that we don't have to have any sort of specifics, if that makes sense. We don't have a specific way of doing this for an NPC versus a specific way of doing this for the player. We're going to be using physics and angles to basically calculate where things need to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off by going into our create event. Now each car is going to have its own particle system, and the particle system is going to be used for basically creating these sprites on the screen, because GameMaker's particle system is 10 times, this is a number I plucked out of the air, but it's 10 times faster than rendering sprites using objects or just the draw event. It's optimized for this sort of thing. So I'm going to start off and we're going to call this psys equals part system create. Put a hyphen instead of a underscore. The next thing we need to do is we need to turn off the automatic draw, because we're going to overwrite the draw event and draw these ourselves. So I'm just going to say part system automatic draw. It's going to be psys and it's going to be false. And what this means is that the particle system won't actually render itself to the screen. Now that's fine, we're going to need to do that ourselves. The next variable I'm going to create is called M. That's going to stand for emitter, and I'm just going to call this part emitter create, and it's going to be from the psys that we just created. So basically particles can now be emitted from this particle system. The next thing we need to do is just say part system position. This may already be set at 0, 0, but I like to set this anyway. I'm just going to set this to 0, 0. Basically, that's going to put the particle system at the top left corner of the screen for every car. And the reason we do this is because we're going to move the emitter around rather than the particle system. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got our particle system created. We're going to add a comment here just to say initialize particles system. There we go. Now we're going to create another one, and we're going to call this one here the tire particle. So let's start off by saying tire part, this just stands for particle, equals part type create. Now we use the part type create function when we want to create our own types of particles. The reason we use part type is because we can then set the properties like the life and the alpha variable over time, if it's using a sprite or not, all of those sort of variables. So I'm going to start off by saying part type sprite, and the index for this is going to be tire part, and the sprite is going to be sprite tire part, which we created in the first video. It's not animated, so it's just going to set this to false. It's not stretched, so I'm going to set that to false, and we don't want to randomize it, so I'm going to set that to false as well. Once you're done there, we're going to move on to doing the life. Now basically the life is how long these particles exist in steps. So I'm just going to say part type life, tire part. The minimum life is going to be 10 steps. The maximum life is going to be 30 steps. Now the final one that we need to do is we need to say part underscore type underscore alpha, and we're going to say alpha 2, and what this does is this, over the lifetime of the particle, will linear interpolate between the two values that we set. So tire part, we're going to say that it starts off at 0.1 alpha and it ends at 0 alpha, so they'll fade away gracefully rather than just disappearing from the world. The next thing we need to do, now that we have the particle system created and the tire particle set up and ready to go, let's go back to our step event. Now under this NPC AI chunk, we're going to add a new chunk. We're going to call this particle systems Yep, that will do. Particle systems. Inside of this, we basically just need to say if phy speed is greater than 1. So if we've built up a little bit of speed, because we don't want the particle systems to be firing when the character isn't moving, the vehicle, when the vehicle's not moving. You don't want to be leaving smoke on the track or tire marks on the track when the car's not moving, because we're not moving. It doesn't make sense. So if the physics speed is greater than 1, we're going to do this this next section here. So what we need to do first is we need to move the emitter to be at the location of the sprite, of the car. So I'm just going to say part emitter, and we're going to use emitter region for this. PSys is going to be PSys, because that's the particle system. The index of this is going to be the emitter that we're using, so it's EMM. Now the X min and X max is going to be the current position -1 and the current position +1. Now this basically just gives us 4 pixels around the sprite's center position. Y min and Y max are the same, so it's Y -1 and then Y +1. Now the distribution we're going to use is PS shape rectangle. If you guys don't really understand what these shape and distributions are, you can check them out in the documentation. Just press F1 right now and you'll find it. Right now if you're inside of GameMaker, not on YouTube. But basically what PS shape rectangle means is that the particles will be emitted in a rectangle shape, and it will be distributed using a Gaussian algorithm. So we're going to use PS distribution Gaussian. And what this basically does is it moves the emitter to the location of the car. Now in order to create these drifts, the drift effects, we need to know 2 things. We need to know our forward direction, so the direction that the car is facing. We also need to know the inertia direction, which is going to be the direction that the car is. I think the word's inertia, I'm not too sure. I'm calling it inertia direction for this tutorial. If I'm wrong, please comment in the comments and let me know, but I think the inertia direction is the direction that the car is moving in. So we could be facing a different direction that we're moving, and it's going to be the angle difference between the direction that we're facing and the direction that we're moving that determines whether or not we're doing a drift or not. So we need to set these 2 variables up. So I'm going to start by saying inertia dir equals point direction. This is going to be from our center position to our center position plus our x speed. So phy underscore speed underscore x, and our y speed is going to be y plus phy underscore speed underscore y. And what this will do is this will actually give us a value in the direction that we're moving. The next one we need to work out is our forward direction. So forward underscore dir equals the same deal, point underscore direction. It's going to be from our center x and our center y. There we go. This time it's going to be at x plus length dir x. We're just going to push this out 50 pixels, and it's going to be at our negative phy rotation. Now the reason why I'm using negative phy rotation is because we could use tdir up here, but tdir only exists if we have a target. Our player doesn't have a target, and because we've applied some sort of offsetting to our physics rotations, because our sprites are facing downwards rather than leftwards, we need to apply some sort of unwrapping or sort of unprocessing to the rotation variables that we did before. So it's going to be negative phy rotation, negative 90 degrees. And we do the same thing for our y direction. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste. I'm going to paste that again, and I'm just going to change those variables to all be y. So it's going to be underscore y. The x is going to be underscore y. So now we have both the direction that we're facing and the direction that we're moving and the direction that we're facing. The next thing to do is work out the difference between those 2. So I'm just going to say angle diff equals ABS. So what ABS, that means absolute. So any number that's below 0 will automatically be converted to a positive number. So if you were to say absolute of 5, it's going to be 5. If you were to say absolute of 10, it's going to be 10. If you were to say absolute of negative 5, it will turn it into 5, because any number less than 0 is going to be flipped back into a positive number. So we're going to use the absolute function, and then we're also going to use the game maker's new angle, I think it's new, angle difference. Now the source and destination is going to be the forward direction, and then the destination is going to be the inertia direction. I'm just going to copy paste that because I can't spell that well. So kids, don't forget to pay attention in school when they're teaching spelling. It really does help. The next thing we're going to do is say if angle diff is greater than 20. Now what this means, we are drifting. Now we know that we're drifting. Now the thing that we can do here, because every single car, doesn't matter if it's an NPC or a player, is now going to have this angle difference function. We can actually draw that on the screen so we can see it. So I'm just going to add a draw event to our base car. And I'm just going to say in here, draw self, because that's the first thing we need to draw ourselves to the screen. Then I'm going to draw text, and it's going to be at x -20, y -20. Now I just pulled those numbers out of thin air, just so that we're not drawing the string on top of the car. I'm going to do that at the text we're going to draw is just going to be a string, and it's just going to be angle diff, the value that we set up inside of the step event. Now if we have a look at our game, oh, we've got a small error there. Angle diff is -1. Oh, of course, we need to jump into our create event and just set angle diff equals 0 first. It actually needs to be created before we can draw it. There we go. So you'll see these cars all have a value now, and that's the difference in angle from the direction they're facing to the direction that they're moving. So what you'll see, if we look at my car currently, the one that I'm driving around, you'll see that as we start to straighten out, as the car starts to straighten out, the difference between the direction that we're moving and the direction that we're facing becomes smaller. Whereas when I start to turn the car, if I start to turn, you'll see that that distance becomes much higher. Obviously, if I make a 90-degree turn, that moves to 90 degrees almost. But then it comes back down because we're moving and physics is taking over and we're starting to face the direction. So the number that I've set 20 as the number of drifting is just from observation. I put these numbers on the screen and I'll drive around some of these corners and I'll say, okay, when do you think we start drifting? And if you drive around the corners nice and slowly, you'll see that the number tends to just get above 20 just as you make a sharp turn. So I think that the number 20 is going to be a good number for us to set our drift at. You guys can adjust this. The larger that number is, the more time you're going to spend drifting. But I think 20 is a good number, so I'm just going to use 20. So now that we've got the angle difference function working, we're just going to go back to our draw event and get rid of that draw text, because that was just to demonstrate how that function was working. We need to start rendering some of these tires. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say render, well, actually we're going to say emit tires onto floor. So to do this, the first thing we need to do is we need to orient the tire particles in the direction that the car is facing. Now, the trickery here is that I've actually, what's going on there? That was kind of an interesting error from GameMaker. You know what? I'm just going to get rid of this image here because it looks like it's causing issues. Let's try that again. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with that issue. Now, the interesting thing here that I've done here, by making the tire particle have the same dimensions and actually have the sprite at the same location of those wheels, when we emit that onto the floor or into the world from the center position of the car, those particles are going to line up with the wheels. So we're going to get a really interesting effect where it actually looks like the particle is being emitted from the wheels. So to do that, we need to first rotate that particle so that it faces the same direction as the car. And we do this using part type orientation. Now the particle type we're going to be using is, if I remember, which I don't, so I'm just going to open this up, is tire part. So we just say tire part. Now the angle min and angle max, we're just going to say this is negative phy underscore rotation. We don't need to apply any sort of correction to this because this is facing, it needs to face the same direction as the car. Now the angle increase is no increase, it does not wiggle, and it is not relative to the movement direction of the particle system. The final thing we need to do is we need to burst those out of the particle system. So we say part emitter burst. The particle system we're going to be using is psys. The emitter we're going to be using is M, which is the one that we created earlier. The particle that we're going to be using is tire underscore part. And the number, this is how many you want to emit into the world. So I want to emit 20 particles into the world from this car. Only when it's drifting. Now what you'll see is nothing happens. So we first need to figure out what's going on, and then we can correct it. So let's just jump back in and have a quick look at what's going on. I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back and let you guys know what happens. Okay, I realized what's happening. We've forgotten to draw the particle system in the world. The reason we need to draw it is because when I created the particle system, which I forgot about, I said to you guys to disable the automatic draw. The reason we need to disable the automatic draw is because we want to make sure that the particle system appears underneath the car and not above the car, because we're laying tracks down onto the road. It would look weird if they were above the car. So jump into the car's base draw event that we created earlier. And just above the draw itself, we need to say, I think it was draw underscore, let me just double check what that was. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was part system draw it. There we go. So let's say part system, and then we need to say draw it. And the index is going to be, no it's not, it's going to be psys. That's going to be the index of the particle system that we want to draw to the screen. So now when we start our game, what you should see is we now have tires. Oops, I've changed some stuff in my code here. That should be 0.1. There we go. That will now match up with what you guys have. So what you'll see here is now we have these tires appearing on the floor. And you can adjust the lifetime of these. They don't have to be so short. The only reason I've got them short is just no particular reason actually. I've just got them set as short, but you'll see that we only get these tires when we actually start to drift. They don't appear all the time, and this is going to be one of the differences between this tutorial and some of the other tutorials that I've seen for a similar sort of game. So our tires will only appear on the map when we're actually drifting, not when we're driving. And as you can see, that value that we selected earlier, the value of 20, that works quite well. You guys can actually adjust the particle system image to be whatever you like it to be. So let's just play with that particle system a little bit. We'll change some of the variables. We'll see what we can get. So if we were to extend the life of these, let's triple the life. We'll make them last for 80 rather than, what was it? It was 30, 369, or we'll sort of triple the life. What you'll see is we get longer trails of particles coming out of the cars. They last on the map a little bit longer. So it gives a more illusion of a long drift coming out of the car. The other thing is, if you think that the tires are too black, we can sort of lower the opacity a little bit. So we say 0.5. Actually, we don't need to lower the opacity. We could actually also lower the amount of particles that get emitted into the world. So we could reduce this from 20 to say 5. And by having less particles being drawn into the world, we get better performance, but we're also going to get less overlap, so the alpha channels don't build up so much. So if you think that that's a better number, that could work. The other thing we could do is we could extend this even further. We could make this last for a minimum of let's say 30 and a maximum of say 200, and hopefully what this will give us is tire tracks that persist into the world for a little bit longer, until we've at least left the screen. So now the tire tracks last a little bit longer, and they don't disappear typically until we've left the screen mostly, or thereabouts. Sort of makes for a more realistic driving experience. The other thing you can do, if you think that the tires are too fat, you can reduce the size of the image that we're emitting into the world using particles. So if we jump back into the particle sprite, we edit that, let's reduce some of these pixels. Let's make it a little smaller actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of the top and bottom row from the top two tiles. I'm also going to reduce the outer rows like that, and I'll do the same thing for these front tires. We should make them a little bit smaller actually, and we'll actually get rid of that top one there. And by doing this, we're actually leaving less pixels on the map. Less pixels on the map is going to make for a smaller tire, or a thinner looking tire I should say. And I think that looks a little bit better, to be honest. Yeah, that looks much better. You can actually see the difference between the four tiles, whereas before you weren't able to see that difference because the particle system was too, sorry, the image that we're emitting into the world, the width of each tile was a little bit too fat. This game is really fun, guys. I hope you guys enjoy playing this, especially if you have an Xbox 360 gamepad, because it's so much fun with a gamepad. We got any people trying to cheat? So a couple of these guys look like, oh, that orange dude, look at him. Did you see that cheat? It's terrible. Okay, so anyway, having a little bit too much fun playing that. So we've got some of the tires being emitted into the world. The next thing that you would probably expect to see is a bit of smoke. Smoke and mirrors. No, not really. It's all an illusion though, and the reason we're using particle systems is just because they perform so well. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if we were to emit objects into the world, the game would run like crap. And so we don't really want to do that. So let's quickly add another sprite. I'm just going to call this one here SPR underscore smoke. This is going to be our smoke underscore part. I'm going to edit this, new image. I'll make this one 32 by 32. And I'm just going to use the airbrush, set the opacity right down, and I'm just going to draw some smoke. Actually, that's terrible smoke. I'm going to draw some more smoke. There we go. It's a bit better. One dark one. I might put a light one, put a really dark one. I'm just trying to get some variance in the pixels here so they don't all look the same. There we go. I might put some white in there in the center, and that's all we need to do. That's our smoke particle right there. I'm going to center that and select OK. Again, the offset doesn't really matter for this one because it's smoke. We want it to look random, so if it rotates funny, that's fantastic. Excuse me. So now what we need to do is we'll set up a smoke particle. Obviously, because if we're drifting around the road, the asphalt's getting hot, the tires are getting hot, it's going to release some smoke as our wheels spin. So that's sort of what we want to do. So we're just going to copy some of these variables from the top here, paste this particle type sprite, and we're going to say particle type create, and this time we're going to call this one here smoke part. There we go, smoke part. For the sprite, we need to use SPR underscore smoke underscore part, and these three variables stay the same because it's not animated. We'll do the animation using the particle system by basically expanding the size, rotating over its lifetime, etc. So the next one we need is part underscore type underscore size. We use the smoke part for this. The minimum size is going to be 0.1, and the maximum size is going to be 2, and over its lifetime it expands in size at a speed of 0.1 per particle system update, or whatever Game Maker uses. The next thing is particle type orientation. So this one, we're going to automatically just set this one here to be rotated randomly. Smoke part, angle minimum is going to be 0, maximum is going to be 359, because 0 to 359 is 360 degrees. It increases at a speed of 1 per particle update. It will wiggle at 1 per particle update, and it's not relative to the movement direction. Now the life, we need to set the life, so we can say particle underscore type underscore life, tire underscore part. Now the life minimum we're going to use is 10, and the maximum is going to be 200. Oh, sorry, 200. The reason we do this is we want some of the smoke to last for a long time, and we want other parts of it not, so that basically we get this sort of volumetric feel. And the final command we're going to use is part underscore type underscore alpha. I'm going to use alpha 2 again. This is going to be, oh sorry, that's supposed to be smoke part, not tire part. It's going to be smoke part. It's going to start at a value of 0.1, and by the end it's going to end at 0. Now we can do the same thing here. We can just copy paste. Actually, no, we can't copy paste this. We need to use something a little different actually. So what we'll do is we'll say emit smoke when drifting. And I might finish that one there off with a full stop as well. So what we do here is, because we're going to be using this smoke particle, we want to change some of these parameters. So this time the smoke is actually going to have a speed. So I'm going to say part underscore type, and we're going to use part type speed. We're going to use the smoke part for this. The minimum speed is going to be 1 and the maximum speed is going to be 2. It doesn't increase with speed and it doesn't wiggle between a certain number over time. Excuse me. The next thing we need to do is we need to set the direction that the smoke will actually move in. So we can say part type direction. We need to use the smoke particle. Now the direction minimum, this is going to be an interesting one. For this we need to use the inertia direction, because we want the smoke to sort of flow out of the car in the direction that we were moving, because you'd think that the car's movement is going to be having some sort of impact on the wind, or sorry, the air in that area. So we're going to use inertia dir. So I'm just going to copy that from the top there. That's the minimum and the maximum, so it's always moving in the same way. It doesn't increase in direction, and it doesn't wiggle in direction either. And then finally we can do this emission as well. So we basically just copy paste the emitter, part emitter burst, psist, the emitter, and we're going to emit the smoke particle. We're only going to emit one of these, because you have to remember that this is in the step event. So as we continue to drift, more of these particles will be emitted. So what you'll see is now as we drift, we get these sort of smoky particles shooting out of the car into the direction of our drift. And you'll see them sort of blow away, and that's sort of suggesting that as we make the drift, we've affected the wind, or not the wind, but the air's movement direction, basically, so that smoke will sort of carry away from the car. As we stop, you'll see it sort of blow forwards if we're drifting. So we can do these sort of sideways parkings. Then you would expect to see that in real life if a car did drift. Now the one thing that we have that looks a little bit weird here is the fact that we can blow smoke over grass, which, I mean, it may happen, but it just doesn't look right for our game. So the next thing we're going to do, and this is going to be the final effect we're going to add to this game, is we're just going to add a little bit of dirt spraying. Now the way we do this is a little different. You can change this as well. You can do multiple types of this. We're going to use something, some sort of zone. So I'm just going to create another sprite. I'm going to call this one here sprite underscore zone. I'm going to edit that sprite, and it's going to be 32 by 32. And once again, you guys have seen me do this 100 times in the RPG tutorial video. Just set a transparent color down. We don't center this, and we just select OK. Now I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to call this object underscore grass underscore zone. We set that sprite for the grass zone, and I'm just going to come back to our level editor, and I'm going to zoom right in, and I'm going to drop my snap down to say 16 by 16, and I'm just going to paste in some of this grass zone and just stretch it out across where all the grass would be. Now obviously this is quite time consuming, so I'm not going to do this for the entire map. I'm just going to do it for a subsection of our game. There we go. Something like that. It doesn't need to be too perfect, it just needs to be there, so that when you collide with this, or when the character is actually over this sprite, we'll get some sort of dirt spraying effect. There we go. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this inside lane as well. There we go. Let's just drag that out to there. I'll drag this one back. Actually, that can probably do it from here. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, guys. I don't want to waste space in these videos. There we go. That's going to do for now. I might just put one more in that corner there, and that will do. So basically now we've set out this little zone that we can be on. We only want to emit the smoke if we're not above grass. So we can simply say something like, oh, I spelled emit wrong. Emit, we'll call this surface-based particles. We'll change the name. So we can say above here, we can say if place meeting, I think Mike Daly will kill me for using this. Most likely. Sorry, I got a bit confused there. If place meeting, we're just going to say x and y is going to be object underscore grass grass zone. So basically, if our car is touching the grass zone, then we're going to emit a different particle. Otherwise, we're most likely going to be on the asphalt, so we're just going to emit this regular smoke. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to our sprites. We'll create another sprite. We're going to call this SPR, and we're just going to call this dirt part. I'm going to edit the sprite. It's a new sprite. It's going to be 32. No, it's going to be 16 by 16. Just make a small one. I'm going to pick a nice brown color, and I'm just going to draw in some, using a smaller brush and full opacity, some dirt just flying out the back of the car. There we go. That'll do. Just 3 little images like that. And we're going to center that as well. So now we need to create another particle. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the smoke particle, and we're just going to call this here the dirt particle. Change the name to dirt particle, and we're going to use a sprite. It's going to have a size, it's going to have a life, and it will also have an alpha. It won't have a orientation, so we can get rid of that. For the sprite, we just use SPR dirt part. There we go. Now the size, we're going to say 0.1 to 0.02. We can use that. So it does increase in size, but it's very slow. For the life of the particle, they're not going to last for very long. They're just going to flick up out the back of the car, then they're going to go away. And their alpha is going to transition from 0.1 to 0. Now that we have the particle set up, we can actually begin to create some sort of emitter for this. So we need to do the speed as well. So we need to do speed. We will need a direction, and we will need an orientation, because we do need to orient it. Part type underscore orientation. There it is. Use the smoke particle. The minimum angle is going to be negative PHY rotation, and the positive angle is going to be negative PHY rotation. It's not going. It will increase in angle. Will it? Yeah, it might. We can just set that to 1. It will wiggle, and it won't. It's not relative to the direction. Now the direction, we're going to use negative PHY rotation for that as well, for the direction. But in this time, we're going to say plus 90, because we need to offset these so that they're actually facing the same direction as the vehicle. And once those have been set, we can then burst that out from behind the car. We do need to change that from, it's not dirt part, it's dirt, sorry. I spelled that wrong, it's my bad. We need to change that from smoke part to dirt part. And now, when we're above one of those grass zones, we should get some nice dirt emitting out. So let's have a quick look at what we get. So you'll see, instead of getting smoke, we're getting dirt, but we're not actually seeing it because there's not enough being emitted. I can sort of see it very, very, very lightly. So let's try and increase the alpha that it starts off as. There we go. So now you'll see we're getting some little dirt shakes, or whatever you'd call them, spitting up from underneath the car. Now, one other thing we can do is we can increase the amount that we spawn. So I'm going to spawn in, let's say, 3 at a time. And hopefully that should give us a bit more dense. There we go. Now we've got a bit more dense dirt Now the one thing I'm not liking is the fact that they are rotating over time, so I'm going to get rid of this angle increase and this angle wiggle. Since we're spawning in more of these particles, I can lower the opacity. I might spawn like 5 or 6 in. Again, just play with the numbers, guys, until you get something that works good. And I'm just going to turn off the visibility on the grass zone so that we're not actually seeing it, so that we can see the dirt a little more clearly. There you go. So now we have some really cool looking dirt that sprays out the back of the car, and it spawns in the same direction that the car moves. Now the reason that we did this is, for instance, let's say we were coming up this track here, we drifted around, we could spit up some dirt just for that corner. So I'll do that facing this way. So you see we get the smoke coming out of the wheels when we're drifting, and then if we cut through this grass, we do get some dirt. The particles aren't great. I mean, I just created them in GameMaker's image editor very quickly. But one thing you'll also notice is that if any of these guys cut through, you'll see that the NPCs also get that effect as well. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this series. The one other thing that we can do really quickly is just turn off those NPC targets. If I turn those off and run the game again, the AI will look a little bit cleaner, more like they're making informed decisions on their own. You'll see some of those NPCs just took some of that dirt out with them. I'm gonna play this game for a little bit and just say thank you guys for watching again. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video. Like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And yeah, I really do hope you guys enjoyed this and got a lot out of it, and at least something that you could use to make your own games in the future. So let's just watch these guys cross over here so you can see them spitting up dirt particles, because they are NPCs, and if they don't go through the dirt, they won't spit up any dirt particles. So I really like this game. I think it's really fun. If you guys do make something with this, please definitely link me a copy, or show me what you guys have made. I'd love to see where this tutorial has helped you get to. So yeah, thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll leave you guys watching me drift around the track chasing these guys.